Hello and live from Las Vegas. It is Acacia Thornton, the CEO legal coach. I'm so excited you're here because today we are talking about what to do when facing difficult people. Ew. But let's face it, when we are in business, it can be common to end up facing difficult people, whether that's difficult employees, difficult business partners, difficult people to negotiate with. And that's what we're going to get into today. We're going to start to talk about, removing the veil. How can we get inside the heads of these people a little bit more to help us accomplish our goals and what we're after while getting everybody on the same side? So let's dive right in. Let's go. So the action headed your way today is we're going to have a bit of a practical guidance, just a mini talk, some examples, walk you through a formula that I have, and tell you some of the stories and difficulties that I've experienced as an attorney, as a successful sales rep, and as a leader in the business world to start giving examples about how we can actually apply this in our business context. And then at the end, of course, we're going to have an open Q&A where you can submit your questions via the chat. We are streaming live on a number of platforms here. So go ahead. They're all going to come to the same place for me, and we'll start to answer those. And along the way there, I'm also going to give you all a freebie for you to have that you can take and start building things with your business today. So if you're ready, because I know I am, bam, let's get into this. Now, first off, who am I? Why would I even know what I am talking about? My name is Acacia Thornton. I am an award-winning sales rep for Fortune 500 as well as a smaller company. I am also a licensed attorney for different Fortune 500 and smaller companies, medium-sized companies, and I've had over a decade as a licensed attorney. And then, of course, I am a business coach and business consultant. I've been doing that for closer to 20 years. And what this means is collectively, I've dealt with a lot of difficult people, and I've helped my clients get through a lot of difficult situations as well. And what I've learned is it's often reframing or reshifting how we're interpreting the other side, especially when it comes to negotiations like a licensed attorney. There's a lot of attorneys out there that sort of have reputations as being difficult, being hardball. You can't move forward, no risk. It's got to be perfect this way or the highway. So we'll talk about some of the things that I've faced and my clients have faced over those 2 decades of experience so that you can learn from it today. The formula. Now, this is a formula that I'm not the first to come up with this formula, but I have found that it's a great way to look at dealing with difficult people. So more and more evidence and science is coming out that when we have thoughts, those thoughts lead to our emotions, and our emotions lead to our actions. And then the outcome of that is our reality that we're seeing every day, what manifests in front of us. And this is true for every single person. Now, these thoughts could be, this is difficult. These thoughts could be, I'm unworthy. These thoughts could be anything that we have learned and adapted over life from our childhood and gotten into our subconscious. But they can also be the thoughts that we're interpreting as adults right here, right now in these scenarios. And then, of course, when we have a thought, we react to that, the emotion, right? If I think I am unworthy, I'm going to think people treat me that way. And I'm going to have an emotion, this guy is being difficult. This woman just doesn't get me. And have these emotional responses. And then for ones that are happening today, those thoughts, it might be this person's being difficult. And then we feel frustrated. I can't get done what I need to get done. And we have those emotions, they build up. They could ball into multiple things, and they could have layers to them. And what ultimately happens, the combination of these thoughts and these emotions, they lead to actions. They lead to what we're saying, how we're saying it, the words we choose. They lead to whether or not we pick up that call and make that cold call or not. Whether or not we're excited to talk to this person. Do we avoid their calls, avoid their emails, avoid their meetings, or do we just step up and get in there? All of these things, these actions that we play out every single day are the result of our thoughts and our emotions. And that's what ends up like totaling into a daily life. And so that is kind of what is happening behind the scenes for us. But here's the thing. It's not just happening for us. It's happening for the other side as well. And so I have this thoughts, emotions, actions represented here on the screen, right? So let's say the other person is going through their thoughts, their emotions, their actions, And then we have you on the other side going through your thoughts, emotions, and your actions, right? You're taking those actions that they're leading and putting out into the world, the reality. You see that. You're going to have your emotional and your thought reactions to that as well. So this formula doesn't happen just on one side. It's going to happen on both sides. And somewhere in the middle is our reality, is what's going on. And this means you've got a lot of power. And I think we forget that sometimes. We get caught up in the emotions or the thoughts or the situation, and we forget how much power we have in a situation, right? We 100% control our actions. We 100% control our emotions, and we can definitely get in there and control our thoughts. But beyond that, it's not just our thoughts for us and of ourselves, but of them, right? If you go back to this formula and we're looking at how thoughts lead to emotions, lead to actions, our thoughts about them, their actions, their emotions, or what we think their thoughts are, now interpret the rest of our equation, our formula as well, which means that when we start looking at these things and deep dive into them, we can shift and change the reality of that conflict a lot faster. So what are these inputs that we're getting from the other side, right? We're going to hear their tone of voice, their word choices, their behavior. We're going to see that. And sometimes their lack of action. Sometimes one of the most difficult things is they're not doing what you need them to do, or they're not responding. You're like, I have followed up with them 20 times. He knows I have a deadline today. What's going on? And so we then interpret those inputs, the actions that we're seeing them put out there. We start to interpret that, and we start to think that they are being difficult. When the truth is, because we don't know what's going on with the thoughts and emotions side of their equation, they may not actually be trying to be difficult. It is our interpretation of it that is leading to difficulties, or the sense of difficulty, that emotional frustration. So that is kind of our first look at this equation, and how can we deal with difficult people is first what's going on the back end for them. Right. I had a client that I used to support, one of their employees, and this employee was cranky, grumpy, old man. And I didn't know if he just hated life, if he hated the world. I didn't know if he was discriminating against me. Did he hate me as a person? I couldn't tell. But I did know that I loathed working with this person and supporting them. It was my job to. I needed to. And I loved that job. But this person, the second I would see their emails in my inbox, I would cringe. After months of working with this person, on one of our calls, we had to have an urgent call, and we hop on the call and he's on video, and he's like, hey, I'm sorry if you hear anything in the background. I'm at the hospital. My wife's getting her cancer treatment today. The reason he was being difficult was, yes, he didn't like having to deal with a lawyer or go through the business situations we were in. But there were other things in his thoughts and his emotions that were impacting those actions that weren't directly related to what he and I were working on, or what our bigger client was working on. There were other things influencing his thoughts and his emotions, because emotions are the direct input into actions. His concerns for his wife and his family, because he had children, was impacting that. I was blind to those thoughts and those emotions on his side, and I could only sit there and interpret what was in front of me, which was his tone of voice, the way he was treating me, and so on. But there was more going on the back end. To help a client once, I had a client who was really frustrated. He was trying to get this project completed, but he needed his partners to sign off. His business was owned 50-50, so to get certain things approved, he had to have the approval of the other partner. The other partner was not responding to him, and it was infuriating him. He's like, he knows I have this deadline. I cannot get through to him. Why isn't he responding? And I was like, hey, Mark, let's take a step back. I know you're after this goal right now, and I know you're up against this deadline. That's got to be stressing you out. And he's like, yeah, it is. I'm ready to move forward, and I can't get his response. I was like, okay, what's the most important thing to him? Your partner. What's the most important thing to him? Is this project the most important thing to him right now? And he's like, no, it's not. In fact, I know what it is. There was something else that when he reframed to look at what might be going on the back end for his business partner, he quickly had his answer and he knew what he needed to say and step up and do to support his business partner. So then his business partner would support him and give him the answer he needed. So a lot of times it's not just what's happening on our end of the equation. It's what we don't see going on the back end of the other half. And that's what's going on the back end with the other party. Another way we can kind of look at this is reframing the goal. When we're dealing with a difficult person, we're probably not there by choice. There's probably a reason we're there, whether it's a business reason, a leadership reason, a revenue goal reason, negotiation, whatever your motivation may be, you're there to accomplish a goal. You have a reason. So one way that we can start to look at things is this the only way to accomplish the goal? An example would be I was working with a client's customer and we were doing negotiations, and this customer had a very strongly opinionated lawyer on the other side. That's the way I will put that. And this person became very difficult to deal with. He even came along and said, "These are the demands that we have, take them or leave them." The problem was those take it or leave it's would actually be negative for my client. And one of them was even borderline illegal. So it was just like, why are you being difficult this way? And I wasn't going to be, while I had ideas about his thoughts and his emotions on the other side, I wasn't going to be able to influence them. I wasn't going to be able to do something with empathy that was going to change his actions. So I reframed the goal. The goal here was to close this deal for my client. And I am dealing with a difficult person on the other side, the other attorney. Well, attorneys work for their clients, which means the client can influence the attorney's decisions. Just because the attorney says this is very risky or this isn't going the way I want, it doesn't mean that's what the business wants or what the business needs. The business person, the business owner, was ultimately the one who could influence the attorney. Now, under legal ethics, I, as an attorney, am not allowed to talk to an opposing client or other side's client. I shouldn't say opposing, the other side's client if I know they have legal counsel. So I can't go to the other side's business team. But I have a business team that I do get to advise, and I can have them go to the other side's business team. So I simply explained the challenges and the difficulties in a way that made sense for my business people to understand how this was negatively affecting their goal. Their goal was to close this deal. And so they went to the other side's business line. I was like, "Hey, I thought we were on the same page about the goal here. The feedback we're getting about your attorney is that they're doing things in conflict to that. Can you either find out why so we can address them, or do you mind just kind of getting them in line?" So sure enough, the other side's business team went to their lawyer and said, "Lawyer, we don't need those things. You're being difficult when there's no need to. Back down." And that's what was important to getting the goal done. The goal was the business deal, not winning, not fighting, not getting through the person that I was supposed to get through. I was able to reframe what the goal was. The goal was to complete negotiations to get the deal done. But me battling, working with, struggling with this one person was not the only way to do that, right? So I was able to find other people that can influence that person or that would have authority over that person who could go in and help resolve the matter more amicably and quickly in a way that got everybody on the same page for the same goal. So this is a way that when we reframe the goal and how we're approaching it, the goal is rarely to win. Is that really what we want for our business? Because winning is about our ego sometimes, or our insecurities and other things. What really is the goal? Why are we interacting with this other side? And are there other people or other approaches that we can take to accomplish that goal? Acknowledge and bring them along. So sometimes there isn't anybody else that we can go to. This is the person we've got to work with. And so what we can do is, while we can't always know those thoughts and those emotions behind the scenes leading to their actions, we do know that we can start to nudge them in our direction. And I call this acknowledge and bring them along. Now, I had learned a formula a while ago, many years ago, that was about, hey, acknowledge the problem, then reframe it, say, hey, am I understanding it? And say it in a different way. And then ask questions for clarity and then address those questions. Now, one of the things for me is when we're in a heated situation or our emotions are involved or we have limited time, stressors, other things going on, it can be difficult to remember to stop and walk through a formula. So, in my experience, I find it just more valuable to stop and reframe. Just reframe. Is it me? Is it them? Because it's probably both. The truth is, it's probably both, right? Our emotional reaction and our actions are what's hitting an energetic conflict. It doesn't mean the conflict is real, it is what is being perceived. And then, how can I help them perceive me differently? And how can I see them differently? And that's why I've created this acknowledge and bring them along. So, in my experience doing a lot of contract negotiations, both in person and on paper, is I have learned that a majority of the time people come in with whatever their stance is. This is how we do things. Now, how we do things has a reason, like a policy, for example. A company policy has a reason it exists, but there's always a justification or reason to have exceptions or carve outs to everything. And so just because there might be a freestanding policy in how they're going to approach or what they're going to ask for in this scenario, doesn't mean it's the only way. So instead of just saying with posturing, I need this is our policy, is to say why. Justify. This is the way this is on the paper because when we see these scenarios, we need to be able to react this way. Or you have this level of obligation in this scenario because you're the one who ultimately controls this and that. Even though we play in this way, here's how your behavior, your situation influences that. And when you start to be able to justify why something is the way it is, the other side can, one, have empathy, understand with emotion and their thoughts why you're coming from your perspective. And they can start to reframe how they approach you. And then the other is, if that's not working, if you're saying your side and the why and reasons behind why things are coming out the way they are from your side, is to start asking them questions. I once had a negotiation where this person was doing the honeys and sweeties and things at me that I thought were very belittling and quite unprofessional for the scenario. But this person was demanding that their client get what they want when their client was very much in the wrong. But this person didn't see their client in the wrong. And that's okay. That is a lawyer's job, was to defend, protect, and represent their client. So I could not convince him to my side because I felt in many ways he was not open to hearing my justifications. So I started asking him questions. Okay, if I do this the way you say, I've got to go to my client, and I know my client is going to ask these questions. How do you suggest I respond to my client with these questions? Now, what I'm doing as I ask these questions to the opposing counsel in this scenario is I'm starting to get them to understand there was no valid reason, or the valid reasons were not going to influence my client and support my client's goals. And so by doing that, I was able to help them open up their thoughts to the situation. They wanted A and B, but by letting them slowly see from their side, because he was not going to listen to me, he was not going to hear me. I needed him to start to see for himself and understand where I was coming from on behalf of my client. So asking questions in a very practical way that get them to think differently, is going to be very helpful, because then it helps bring them along without them feeling forced, without them being told. Nobody wants to be told what to do or how to behave. We all want to make our own independent decisions about things. And we want to feel that we are making our own independent decisions about things. So all I could do, if I can't justify to them why things are the way they are in this scenario and why I am behaving or saying the words I am, is to start asking them questions so I can get more input from their side and help them see where I'm coming from, so that we get to that understanding of the thoughts, emotions, actions from both sides to come together into a new reality in how we are interpreting that for and on behalf of each other. Mm-hmm. Right? Is this, you guys finding this helpful? Let's go down to the chat. I want to connect with all of you because I want to make sure that I am saying things in a way that are resonating with all of you. Yes, this is. I never, yeah, right. Never really looked at it this way. Sometimes we look so much at the formula. We're trying to go da 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 da, and we try to. I call it logicize. We think our way through things, not realizing those thoughts, impact our emotions, and our emotions impact those thoughts. And what we're perceiving isn't always reality. In fact, I have a great story. If you guys don't mind for a second, I'm going to take a little side trip. Last year, I was the victim. My mother and I were the victim of an attempted mass shooting. And it was a very, very scary situation for us. And of course, emotions are high. Thoughts of I might die, I might be harmed, resulted in actions, running, hiding, all of these things. Well, and I had to give my testimony to the police, to the detectives, I had to give it in written, I had to give it in verbal form, all of these things that day. It was a very scary day, only to learn in time that as more evidence came out, my interpretation of certain sounds and visuals I had that day. Well, yes, I'm so glad I had the emotions and the actions to respond, to hide myself, keep myself safe, and do the same for my mother. What ultimately was what I thought were gunshots weren't. What I thought were different things didn't happen that way. My perception of a life-threatening event, well, it was a life-threatening event. It wasn't in all the ways that I had lived it that day. I had a different perception of certain sights and sounds, that my body reacted in survival mode the way I am more than happy it did. And I would gladly have those same interpretations again. But ultimately, wasn't the reality of the truth that day as we began to talk to other people. There were video, there were sounds, there were audio, and other things from the experience that I was like, wait, but I know there was a round of gunfire when I stood right here. I know he came in wearing the helmet and the gun looked like this. I know these things. But did I? Or did I just interpret them? And it turns out it was a mixture. Some things I was absolutely accurate on and very glad I reacted the way I did. But other things, they weren't quite as I perceived them. And so looking back now, it's very interesting to see my reality as I experienced that versus the reality of the truth, even from the gunman's perspective, because I would have been holding him accountable for things he didn't actually do. And that's like, whoa, right? That's not somebody I'm eager to get in there and be like, oh, yeah, it's all okay. Because no, that was not okay. It will never be okay. Nobody should ever take our pain and anger out on others, ever. But the truth is, I judged him more harshly because I had interpreted things more harshly than was the reality. And so being honest with ourselves, this is a great segue into our next slide here, being honest with ourselves, are we coming in with our mentality, everything we've experienced and seen before, triggers, our brains want to get to shortcuts quickly. You hear gunfire, bam, you hide. Well, maybe it wasn't gunfire, maybe it was a firework. Maybe it was actually a fun, exciting celebration thing that I interpreted differently. It's the same for us in the workplace. What is our mentality? What have we learned or seen before? When we've dealt with a difficult person before who did certain actions and we interpreted them a certain way, it does not automatically mean the next time we see or sense those actions in reality that it's true. But then there's also this idea of a lack mentality. This comes up a lot with when there's revenue involved in sales situations. We fight so hard to close this deal. We fight so hard to get this negotiation done. When the truth is it the only one? We talked about reframing the goal earlier and the goal in this scenario. But a bigger goal is to bring in revenue. Is this the only way to bring in revenue? Is this the only sale we could possibly close right now? Are there other sales we can go after that maybe aren't going to be so difficult? Yeah, maybe we've let the pipeline or the funnel run dry or low, but that's part of our actions. And then we are having a thought and emotional reaction to a low pipeline, to a low revenue month, a low revenue quarter. And we react as if there's no other opportunities for abundance. There are plenty of potential clients out there, but we did not set ourselves up for success. So in this moment, we feel the stress and the pressure of getting this one done. And we hound at that. This sale, I need the sale, I need the sale, I need the sale. Is this the sale that you need? Or can we take a step back and reframe our mentality around what's going on? Same with those actions, right? We act and behave differently out of desperation, out of panic, out of stress when we feel that there's not enough. So lack actions. This comes again from the lack mentality because thoughts lead to the emotions and actions. But when we feel there is not enough of something, not enough revenue, not enough clients, we create actions based on that. And people sense our actions. Our actions, our words, our tones, our behavior are what the other side gets to interpret and see in that reality. That on that equation, right? Reality in the middle is what we put into it, but also how they're going to take out of it. And so when we come in thinking there's not enough, when we come in forcing a situation, we start to give them the opportunity to sense and react to that. And sometimes they may choose not to react with us at all. They may be like, hey, there's another vendor, another supplier I could go to. You're a difficult customer. I'm going to let you go. Those types of things. So being aware of where we are internally and what we are bringing, not just to this deal or to this person, but to the situation that brought us here in the first place. And a lot of times that comes out of insecurities. Insecurities for us individually, a lack of unworthiness, uncertainty, not believing that we're good enough, fears, and so on. So just being honest with ourselves can really help in these types of situations. Now, what ultimately are the action steps to take here? Is to be aware. Just remind ourselves of something. We're hitting that conflict. Don't keep pounding into it with your emotions. Your emotions are in the middle of that equation. Thoughts to emotions, emotions to actions. So when we start to sense those emotions and we're not liking those emotions, is to take the step back for a second. Just be mindful and aware. Hey, I'm not liking the feelings that I'm having here. Do I need to change the thought side or the action side of my equation? And just practice. Practice. The first step to anything is being aware. Being aware of our role, being aware of our reaction, but also our awareness of how we're interpreting them. Because we cannot control them, but we do have a lot of things that we get to control. And that's remembering you have a lot of power here. So take the step back, reframe. Are there different actions I could be taking? Are there different emotional responses I could be having here? Are there different thoughts I could have? What are my thoughts that have led to this situation? And what are the thoughts I am having of them? And are they the only way to be interpreting or seeing them? Because there might be things going on the back end that we're not aware of. And then working our way through questions, justifying our situation, why we are doing this, and being able to communicate that is now what's going to lead to having better resolution whenever we are sensing a difficult person. Because nobody goes out into the world being like, you know what, I feel like being difficult today. There are reasons we do things as humans. They're going to have their reasons. We're going to have ours. And let's do what we can do to remove the negativity and bring in ways that can be more empathetic and resolving to the situation. So let's get into our freebie and Q&A time. I love it. So go ahead, and if you have any questions or any comments about today's talk, go ahead and put those into the chat. I will try to get to them as soon as I can. And as those are coming in, today's freebie is a free non-disclosure agreement with customization. How that applies to today is that whenever we're out there having conversations with people, we're building new business relationships, we're enhancing existing ones, or we're trying to solve problems like negotiation or getting a deal done, oftentimes we are exchanging confidential information for our business. And right, we talked about how just justifying things. This is why we have things this way. This is how we come to these types of decisions as a company. This is why we approach things this way. All of these things are giving into intimate details about your company, its operations. And an NDA is the free and easy way to protect all of that every single day. And it's not just going to protect those things, it's going to protect everything else about your conversations, including your brilliant ideas, your revenue plans, your products, all of those things, anything you list as confidential information on there is going to be protected. It's going to be protected in a way that they can't just go share these with your competitors. They can't go put this on the internet. They can't make money from this in a way that you don't approve, and so on. An NDA is the simple and easy way to get all of that done every single day. And I can tell you from having worked with the big leagues and worked in sales in a number of ways, this is what those guys are doing every single day. Sales conversations are often not allowed to happen without an NDA in place. Definitely no business relationships on paper without an NDA in place, and so on. So let's go ahead and get into your questions. What do we got here, guys? What do we got? Okay, so, yes. Okay, all right. How can you proactively create a supporting? Yeah, no, this is great. How do you get in there proactively, right? Like, let's talk about not even getting to the conflict point for a second. So, and this could happen like with your employees, but it can also happen with the other side. Is we talk about the goal a little bit, right? And the goals are why. Why are we doing this? Why are we here? Getting everybody on the same why. Clarifying that, hey, the goal here is to supply your company with a product that does these great things. And you want that from a company that you trust. And so that's how we're going to do this. Or if it's an employee situation, getting the team involved into the why. Whenever we're at work, look, we all work to make money and make revenue, whether that's as an employee or as a business owner. But we also do it to bring value to our lives. We want to feel connected. We want to feel that we are contributing to something bigger than us. And knowing the why behind something really helps us get there and connect with that. We feel part of something bigger. And this is definitely big in the employee context because employees don't get to see everything that you do when you're up at management and the C-suite. They don't know those bigger level goals. They just see the little tasks in front of them. And tasks can become daunting. They can become boring, and they become transactional in a way that you feel you've lost value. So by giving everybody the why, the mission, the purpose, and how everyone's individual pieces play in is going to be a big part of creating that supporting goal, right? And so when we all feel supported, we all feel heard and part of something bigger, we usually are more likely to cooperate. The other part of that is allowing for questions. Don't see questions as, and this is a generational thing. I had a training many years back about how different generations treat questions. The baby boomers, they kind of grew up around parents that had been in the military, who had been through wars. And so they don't question authority. They weren't allowed to ask questions because the response would be, because I told you so. But our younger generations, they start to see questions because they want to understand or because they want to do it right. Maybe there's something, so they might just feel like, well, why are we doing this? And to a certain authority type, that might be like, because I said so, because this is your job. They may be asking from a different place. So encouraging questions from the other side or from your team and allowing them to ask them, why are we doing this? We're doing this because it's going to help us build this product. We're doing this because it's going to help us build these deals. And these deals are going to lead to this type of opportunity for everyone. This product is going to change the world and the industry in these ways. So if they're asking why, it's usually because they don't fully understand something, not a challenge to authority. As part of a sort of the interpretation of somebody else's actions in a way that what they're asking, the way they're asking it may not be the way we're interpreting it. So that, and then of course, honoring humanity, right? No one is perfect. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. Mistakes happen. And allowing that to be okay. There's a difference between repeating mistakes, but there's also growing. And when we allow our people and our teams to, oh, you didn't understand that? I'm sorry, I didn't explain that well. Here's how we're going to do better next time. Or, hey, I saw that you were doing this. Did you know that you can do these things? When we have that goal and we start to put in the right types of information, the questions being asked by both sides, because we can also ask questions of the other side and of our employees to understand better. It's about fostering the environment to begin with. And when we do that, you're going to avoid conflict a much easier, because the conflict won't be so hard and difficult, because everyone will feel more comfortable being able to explain or justify or ask the questions before you even get there. Yeah, good question. Let's see what else we got. I know, right? Yeah, that I totally agree. No, someone was saying that they had really never thought about the authority to employee situation that way. And it's like, yeah, it is, right? Either you're the employee or you're the authority, but we sometimes forget that, flip the switch. Do you want to be talked to that way? Do you want to be treated that way? If this was, role reversal, what can we do to help that? What would motivate you as an employee who had to maybe do something you didn't want to do? But we do all have different motivations. That's a whole other training, but yeah. Are there legal and ethical stuff? Yes. This is another great question. When we're in conflict, depending on where the conflict is, it could lead to perceptions of discrimination or harassment. And it doesn't mean you are intending to discriminate. That might not be your thoughts. Those might not be your emotions, or they might be subconsciously and you're not aware of it. But there's also how they interpret our behavior. And we don't want to be fostering environments that have things that could be seen as discrimination or harassment, because we can't control their interpretation, but we can control our thoughts, our actions, and our behaviors. So being mindful of, is there even an opportunity for the most sensitive person in the world to see these things that way? Then we have a responsibility to come in and foster and build a different environment. So you don't want to be doing that. And in the legal and ethical context, right, the consequences really come out, and is there going to ever be enforcement? And enforcement would usually end up being a fine from an agency like OSHA or something, or an employment, but also a lawsuit. And so what you would want to do is then the behaviors, the words, the tones, the actions you're taking, how would an independent third party who does not have your thoughts and your background, who does not have the emotional reaction that you are having or that led to those actions, somebody with a different thought process, a different emotional response, a third party entirely, how might they interpret these things? Because those are the ones that are ultimately going to be like, yeah, this other person, they were reasonable and feeling they were being harassed, or this was a hostile environment, or yeah, I could see how this results in discrimination, because there is a pattern of behavior. And those usually a pattern, right? One off, unless you're saying something very direct where it's like, okay, that was clearly not okay to say, which I would really hope that we're all, our mindsets and emotions are, adapting to the way culture and life is these days, which is honestly the way it's always been. And we just haven't been as honest with ourselves. And I'm glad that honesty is happening. But being mindful of, we have a responsibility along that way to clean that up, especially how we're treating others or the environments that we are fostering. Because yes, you can definitely. Are there, what are some other things? Okay, like, yeah, okay. Yeah, you're having the emotions. Okay. So this question is about having the emotions. You're in the space, you've got to deal with this person, you got to get through it. What do you do? For me, what I always find is reframing my goal and how I get that goal done. Okay, I got to close this deal. Great. Do I need to have an emotional reaction to that? No, it has to get done. It's just a task. It's just an action. Just an action. Okay. What are the actions I need to take to get that task done? And how can I make those easy on myself? Nobody gets a raise for stressing. Nobody gets more money out of the situation for stressing. Nobody gets more deals closed because they stressed. Our emotion in it actually is really going to impact the outcome the way we want. So the more we can remove the emotional reaction, the more it can help us get through whatever action or tasks we have to do to get it done. Right? When I was in sales, like cold calling is a great example. Don't take it personally. Don't have thoughts that it's about you. Don't have the emotions, negative emotions, right? Remove those. Just focus on the task. The task is, I know if I make 100 cold calls today, I will at least have done the task I need to do. What's the easiest way I can do those? So I would take whatever is going on for you, see if you can remove the emotions altogether and just look at it as, here's the to-do list. Here's the steps I got to take. What's the easiest way I can get these done? What's the quickest way I can get these done at a standard of quality that I deliver and I deserve and my clients deserve? And let that be that. Sometimes it really is just turning it into a checklist, no emotions, get through it, get it done so you can get it off your plate. Because sometimes just lingering on your plate or not getting it done leads to more stress, leads to building more emotions, and that just doesn't make it easier for anyone. Yeah, great question. Great question, guys. Awesome. Any other questions? Helpful. Yes, I'm glad you're finding this helpful. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, as always, if things come up after the fact, you can always reach me through my website, ceolegalcoach.com.